Welcome to The PA is In, the show created by PAs for PAs, where codependency with your supervising physician is a thing of the past, optimal team practice is the future, and physician associate has taken the place of physician assistant as the professional title of choice. I'm Tracy Bingaman, and I'm obsessed with redefining what success as a PA looks like and what it feels like. Here you'll find the mindset shifts, systems, and processes I use to escape healthcare burnout and integrate my work into my life. Work-life balance is a myth, and an integrated life where you thrive professionally, not a balancing act, is the goal here. My mission is to help you to grow into a unicorn PA who loves their job, has abundant energy, time to spare, and work-optional financial freedom. The PA is in. You ever find that you meet someone on the internet and then when you get to meet them in person, or in my case, sit down and record a podcast episode, that you realize that this is something that someone that you really want to know in real life? I want you to meet Adrian Banning. Adrian is an associate professor at a PA program, but she's also a lover of life and evidence-based medicine and finding ways that you can live your best, fullest life with the healthiest habits. Without further ado, here she is, my new friend, Adrian Banning. Adrian, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Tracy, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Could you take a moment to introduce yourself, tell us about you and what you do?
Yeah, long story short, as each year passes, we head on to this, right? My name is Adrian Banning. I am, amongst other things, a physician assistant and a physician assistant educator. I grew up in northeastern Pennsylvania, and then I went to school in southeastern Pennsylvania. And after all of that, I moved to Vermont for a little while and did primary care there, specifically with military veterans. I came back and I started teaching right away at Drexel University in Philadelphia. And while there, I also did some care at an acute psychiatric clinic. So that's my clinical background, but the majority, honestly, of my time has been spent professionally anyway, for what I get a paycheck for and what I think about most of the time, in education, in helping other people to achieve their goal of becoming a PA. So I now still live in southeastern Pennsylvania with my husband, with my dog, love being outside, and love thinking about ways to, I guess, transform, or what is, whether it has to be transformed or not, like the next era of me.
That is so interesting. I do feel like life is seasons, right? We have these seasons of life, and too rarely do we take a moment to say, hey, what season am I in? And what what do I want to become? We're all in the process of becoming, right?
Yeah. And there's lots of in between too, which was actually the theme that my yoga instructor was speaking about yesterday, that, you think you're at A and you're going to B, but there's something in between A and B. And how many times do we skip that, or we're just laser focused on getting to the next thing, when there's really, most of life probably is the in between.
Yeah. Yeah. The journey, not the destination, right? The going there. Very cool. So I'd like to dive into talking about evidence-based medicine. Now, from learning in school to when you're out practicing clinically, what are some tips that you have for us? The majority of the listeners are actively practicing clinicians who are no longer inside a classroom without someone saying, hey, here's what the evidence says. So how can we integrate evidence-based practice into our work while still working and seeing patients?
First of all, I'd say, I'm sorry. I think there's a good chance that it somehow traumatized you, even a little bit, in PA school, that in some way it wasn't fun, and maybe it was a little bit painful. And unless you were someone who loved going to like advanced algebra class, it kind of seemed like, ugh, I'm not going to do this. Why are you making me like do these painful like equations or learn these numbers? This doesn't seem applicable or realistic, but I quote unquote have to do it so that I can get to the next thing. And yet, if you stopped saying that you were quote unquote good at math or liked math then in junior high or high school, there's still a lot of math left in your life, right? You do rent and mortgages, and you have to know, compound interest, and my gosh, student loans, of course. So you can't write the whole thing off. So I would say first and foremost, examine whether maybe this is something you have to go to therapy for and readjust. Is there some icky feelings around it? I think too, like you said, no one's going to come and tell you when something has changed, and you don't have time to sit down and not only read, but critically appraise an article and stay up to date on how to critically appraise an article and what kind of stats are they talking about. So I kind of felt this way. I had come from a research background before PA school, but I was doing it. I wasn't building it or constructing it. And I think so many times when we think of evidence-based medicine, that's what people think it is. It's research methodology, as opposed to how do we obtain and apply the best evidence with our practice, with our experience, with our patients and their preferences. So one day, after being told that I had to teach this, and I thought, I might get fired. Like, I'm not interested in this. They're going to figure out that I'm an imposter. And right, like everyone's like, one day they're going to figure out. Like, what if we're just good at what we do? What if we're all just good at it? So anyway, I go to this conference, mostly led by Slauson and Shaughnessy, these two evidence-based medicine experts in the US who put together this concept called information mastery. And it basically says you need a system for information coming to you, and you need a couple sources in your back pocket to go to when you have a clinical question that you can trust. Because the validity of something and the applicability of it is divided by the amount of time it takes to get it. That's how useful information is. So I think there's a couple things that you need. You need a system of information coming to you, a trusted source. Generally, you pay for them, right? There's no free lunch. So if you want high quality information that has already been pre-consumed and chewed up and spit out for you, someone needs to get paid to do that if they do it well. We all get free flyers coming, but who's paying for that? Oftentimes it's industry, and there's so many conflicts of interest. So how do you get information that comes to you? Is it a podcast? Is it an email? Is it a daily email? You can't sign up for every journal to send you updates. Okay, that's fine. So that you do know if the thing that you do all day long has changed overnight. And then you need a system. The second part of your system is that you need a place to go to if you have to look something up. And most of our employers, maybe not most, many of our employers pay for databases that we can go to that also give us CME when we look something up. But I would implore you to ask yourself if that information is pre-critically appraised, and do you know how they do it? Or do you just think, well, they must be experts who read this and digest it, and they're only giving me the best of what's out there. That's not exactly true. So if your employer is already paying for something, all right, ask yourself, how good is it? Or is it just convenient and flashy? And if you have a say in the next thing, what is the best information out there to come to you? What database would you want to be using? So information coming to you, a good place to go, and to realize it's not as scary as you think. It's just honestly helping you sleep better at night when you know you're not guessing.
Yeah. And I think that's what everyone wants to feel, right? They want to feel like a patient came in with a problem and I either knew what to do, period, great, do your thing, or I didn't know what to do. And if I didn't know what to do, did I know how to find out? And that is essentially what we're doing. We don't need to know everything that every patient is ever going to ask us. But we do need to know is what are good sources? Are they vetted? And how can I find this information out so that I can take good care of people down the road?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So can you give us some tips on how to identify what areas we might be weak in? Because clinically, I know there are some things I'm much more comfortable with and some things I'm less comfortable with. But does that mean that I need to look up the less comfortable stuff? How do I know where those holes in my own clinical knowledge are?
That's a tough one, I think, because even if it's something that you do all day long and you think you know, how do you know, right? Where did you originally get that information? Was it a preceptor? Was it PA school? And how long ago was that? Was it even right when it got to you? I think it's important to read the things that you believe you already know that might feel really comfortable, but it's really uncomfortable when you get to something that doesn't agree with what you do and you think, well, this can't be right, because that's our ego, right? That doesn't feel good when you think, gosh, yesterday I was patching all my corneal abrasions. This is an example that Slauson and Shaughnessy would use. And then you read something that says, don't patch corneal abrasions. And you think, gosh, I'm a terrible person. I'm awful. I don't know what I'm doing. Blah, blah, blah. And it like hurts a little bit. Okay, but when you know better, do better. Then tomorrow you can stop patching the corneal abrasions. And okay, you have to evolve. But that it takes something, that there's some type of emotion in there. So I'd say you have to kind of keep reading the stuff that you're good at. But I think in my students, I see generally they're not good yet at, and me too, the things that we don't like. You don't like insulin. You don't like derm. Okay, well, it doesn't like you right now. Can you put your arms around it? I think that they're the two extremes to start with, and then things fall together in the middle a little bit. Of course, you can take quizzes and assessments. You know, you take a practice quiz here, you do some multiple choice questions. That's not the only way that we know is best to assess knowledge. But if you continually find that you get the GI questions wrong, well, okay, that's obvious. But if you're not actually prepping for the PANRA, are you really practicing, like assessing your own knowledge? So I might dip my toe into the things that I think I already know and feel really confident in with a brave heart, and then go to the things that I just don't like, because how are you ever gonna be good at that stuff?
It's interesting. I was just at a training where someone was talking about the specific anatomy in terms of how I was injecting something, and they cited this study and I read it. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to change the way that I've been practicing for the last several years. And the first few days that I was doing it, I felt very uncomfortable. Like I was like wearing something that didn't quite fit. It felt very strange. And I felt like, well, last Friday I did this differently, and now it's this week and I'm doing it this way. And I almost had to talk myself into, okay, remember, this is why we're doing this. This is why we're trying this new. This is why we're doing this new approach, because it's safer, because the results are, for all of these reasons. But I was in practice like, this feels weird. It feels weird to do it this new way because it's not the way that I'm used to.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I think we like feeling comfortable. Of course you liked feeling comfortable, and it felt so weird. And you weren't in the study, and it was just one study, right? You kind of wonder, like, wait, this doesn't feel good. Is it really best? Like, oh, I could just do it the way I've always been doing it, and that would feel a lot better. But when you went to PA school, everything felt this way. You were new at everything, and it sucks to be new. And, generally PAs were high achievers, were generally, not everyone, type A. You get used to being good at stuff, and it just doesn't feel good. But now, how are the injections going? Have you transitioned to the new way, and how's it going
very
now?
fresh. It was just a couple of weeks ago, and I have been doing it regularly. And I try to think of things like that as this is another approach. Does it mean that every single time I will do this exact approach? Probably not, right? It will probably depend on anatomy and aesthetic outcome and what we're looking for. But it's another thing that I now know how to do, that I'm now comfortable, and that when I'm evaluating someone, I can use this approach. And I think the thing about aesthetics is we get immediate feedback, especially when we're doing filler, like, hey, here's how it looks. Now we know. When you're starting someone on a new medication or you're doing a new interviewing technique, you don't always get that immediate feedback. Sometimes you say, we're going to try this new approach, and it's months before you know if someone's hemoglobin A1C is better, or it's months before you know, are we really doing better by these specific patients with this specific diagnosis? So sometimes you feel like, okay, we're just going to do it. We're going to do it and see how it goes based on this evidence, and sort of trust the process that it's going to work out.
Trust the process. Yeah, that's a big one. Absolutely. Yeah, that's a very popular phrase in Philadelphia.
I If you're often freezing at work, you need Scrubmates, the insulating underscrub to treat your shivering. Like a bear hugger for providers, these underscrubs will keep you warm even in the coldest environments. Scrubmates offers a sleeveless option approved for the OR, as well as long-sleeved options for those who work elsewhere. They even have a patent-pending pocket for your valuables. No more tying your rings to your scrub drawstrings. Life is too short to have goosebumps all day. A PA-founded company, Scrubmates is on a quest to make your day more comfortable with super soft, functional, and affordable scrubs and underscrubs. Head to wearscrubmates.com to fight the hospital freeze. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about lifestyle medicine. Before we hit record, we talked a little bit about how when you and I were in school, this was something that they sort of said, lifestyle modifications is the first line treatment for almost everything, but the actual treatment is this. But the actual treatment is pharmacology or surgery or some sort of Western medicine intervention. As a student, I feel like we rarely covered this in detail. So talk to us about how we can not skip over those lifestyle modifications when we're treating patients, when we're educating them, when we're encouraging them to adjust their lifestyle because they have a new diagnosis, because they have something going on.
Right. So it comes back down to like what's easy, right? It is not only not easy, it is actively hard to change something that you've been doing. Patterns are very hard. So much of our lifestyle is intricately linked and unremovable from culture and from our families. And to, first of all, tell someone that they have to change those things, I don't know about you. I don't normally take kindly to someone saying, here's what's going to totally fix everything in your life, and I have all the answers, just do what I tell you. Generally, as a human, actively, I kind of don't do that. So it is really hard to change your sleep hygiene and how you manage stress. And if you've got toxins in your life for whatever reason and whatever you were, bringing them into your life to begin with for, the diet that you have and how much you move, they're gigantic. How much social connection you have and true social connection, these are the pillars of lifestyle medicine. And yet, the evidence that we have that changing those 6 pillars and moving them into the direction that the evidence supports, a plant-based whole food diet, more exercise. Now, we don't have to be marathon runners, good sleep hygiene, good social connection, stress reduction, elimination of toxins. The evidence behind those things mitigating the top killers in our country, not mitigating, but in many cases reversing, is irrefutable at this point in time. How much animal-based protein is literally linked to cancer causing? We're worried about BPA. I just saw a t-shirt for sale that said BPA free. And I was like, I'm pretty sure this is not the number one cause of hospitalizations in the United States, that we've got BPA in our t-shirts. But there's so much on social media about like hormones, balance your hormones. Like what hormones? How do you want me to balance them? What needs to go up and what needs to come down? Do the people who are talking about these things even know? Or like, are we just going through natural hormonal changes because we're people and that's what happens in life? But there's always some quick fix, or here's my best exercise plan, or you have to have this diet. It's so simple that you have to, like Michael Pollan says, don't eat too much, eat mostly plants, move your body. It has to be food that you recognize. The actual evidence-based medicine, going back to EBM, is huge. That I think 8 top reasons for hospitalization and 8 main healthcare costs are all chronic diseases that are all directly linked to choices people make about their lifestyle. And so I know I don't necessarily want to have this knowledge, right? I want the evidence to say, lay on your couch and eat like what seems most delicious or what's most comforting to you. And that's how you're going to have the happiest, highest quality life. Like I wish, but it's not that. And I almost wish I didn't know, right? Because of this like kind of burden of knowledge. But the way that you can improve insulin resistance improve diabetes, sometimes not only prevent, but reverse heart disease. Heart disease is the number one killer, right? Remove some of the risk factors that we have behind animal proteins and alcohol to cancer. And that's hard too when we think that, cancer is something totally random that has nothing to do with your behaviors. Oh, unless you use tobacco. And then we kind of have a little bit of judgment around that. Like, oh, well, if you could just stop smoking. But no one's talking about the cheeseburger, right? Um, and that the public, I feel like, doesn't know that. And that's not what social media is saying. Social media will tell you that you need 100 grams of protein per pound of body weight. And that's literally double what the government, like the government's supposed to tell us, right? But that how we use protein. We really only need somewhere for different people around 0.8 per kilogram. So about half as much. And we do have evidence that higher intake of protein is related to some higher cancer incidence. That doesn't mean that people who are vegan never have any chronic disease or cancer. No, of course not. But the way that we improve the choices that we make are so intricate and so difficult and so much harder than saying, here's your metformin or increase of metformin, or for Pete's sake, the GLP-1s, right? So helpful and so everywhere, but so much easier than doing the hard work.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting because I almost feel like the thing that I was in school 12 to 15 years ago. And at that time, it was almost assumed like you'll tell them to modify their lifestyle, but you know that they won't. So here's what we do. Now I think people are, but they are modifying their lifestyle based on a 30-second video they saw on the internet. And they're not fact checking what that person is saying, which is dangerous in another way, right? So, like, if someone on the internet is saying, oh, diabetes can be cured with a plant-based diet, and your person says, great, I don't need my insulin, we have a problem, right? Like, would it be better? Sure. But you sort of have to do it in conjunction with your provider. And so providers are in this interesting spot where they're like, hey, if you're thinking about making some lifestyle choice, like, I support you. Can we talk about it? Right? Like, these things are going to affect your overall health, the medications that you're on. Like, maybe you don't need some of them someday, but you can't make that decision in isolation, right? We have to have some proof that things are better as we're easing you off of these meds. How do you navigate that as a provider in terms of misinformation and people sort of pell-mell making decisions on their own?
Pell-mell. I love that word, just time out for pell-mell, and also melee. I think they go together, and I think that we don't use them enough generally. So that's if everyone's cool. I'm going to be honest, I think that it's probably not normally that way. I don't think I have patients coming and saying, I really want to exercise more and I want to move towards a plant-based diet, or when I'm seeing patients and I'm like, oh, hold on. Wait a second, because the evidence there is actually really supportive. Cure diabetes? No. Reduce it? Put it into remission? Maybe. I think it's more so, here, I read this thing online, or I'm not even going to tell you, I'm just doing this thing. And you're not even going to know, because I'm afraid that you're going to tell me no, or you're going to judge me. And my past experience with providers has been somehow negative, that we're not collaborative in this way. And I think, honestly, that's on us to create that relationship, trusting relationship, and realize that people have been harmed by healthcare. They have good reason not to trust. We're driving costs up. It's the number one cause of bankruptcy in the United States, healthcare, right? So people come with a lot of inability to control their own healthcare. And I think sometimes finding things online gives a lot of agency and gives the power back a lot. And that's important to think about. So I think it really starts at the beginning of, not just with patients, literally any relationship. How can you have mutual trust and respect so that hopefully you're bringing new ideas to the table and feeling safe that you're not going to get judged for them in either direction. and that you have evidence for one thing or the other, even if it's not something that you normally would have used, how do you know that? I don't know. I'm going to pull something out of my hat for a second. How do you know that cinnamon isn't going to help improve someone's quality of life who has diabetes? Not just lower their A1C, but do they have a lower risk of renal disease, of heart attack, of stroke, right? Those patient-oriented evidence components. I think too, if you're not sure that it doesn't work, I think that there's something to be said for trying not to be dismissive for your ideas, for your own confirmation bias too. So that's, like everything we've said before, easier said than done, especially if you see someone once a year for 15 minutes, right? How are you going to build up that trusting relationship then and there? It's a tough one, Tracy. I don't have that's the thoughts off the top of my head, but I don't think I have a magic answer. We would say motivational interviewing, right? We would say assess someone's, Prochaska and Di Clemente stage of change and proceed with cultural humility. And you can say all those buzzwords, but I don't know. They're so hard. They're so hard to apply.
Yeah. I have had some experiences with patients where they have seemed hesitant to tell me something because they're worried about the way that I'm going to react. Now, I think based on the people that I'm thinking of, that was their concerns about me reacting a certain way was based on behavior of some provider who I've never met, who maybe treated them in a certain way, and they're coming into a relationship with me, putting me in the same category as people who have dismissed those ideas, who have said, it's not a safe place for you to ask questions or like be yourself. And so it's an interesting thing to think about. This provider-patient relationship is colored by all the providers that patient has seen in the past. And also our interactions with patients are informed by the patients that we've had in the past, because maybe we tried that motivational interviewing and we didn't really have our hands around it. It didn't go so well. So now we're worried about trying it again because it didn't go great with the patient in the past. So it's so interesting because even as you walk into a new exam room, like, oh, the slate's wiped clean, it's really not, because you're not the same provider you were when you first graduated school. You have all of these experiences, good, bad, and otherwise, that are helping you to grow into the provider that you'll someday be.
It is so hard. I think it is so hard to be a person, to people. And then in this intricate setting and power differentials, it is so hard to be a healthcare provider some days, right? To be a PA. And some days it's so easy and you're like, oh yeah, this is why I did it. I've got the bit between my teeth. Like, of course I've made all the right decisions in my life to get here. And then sometimes what we're asked to do just seems really impossible. And I applaud every single person who's made that choice or faced those difficult days. It's just hard because we are humans and it's messy. But there's also these bright glimmers of wonder and hope sometimes that happen. And you're just like, oh, everything is clicking. Yeah. And then you say, okay, I can try again.
Have you ever wondered if your malpractice policy is providing you with enough coverage? Turns out that employers' policies protect their interest and not necessarily yours. CM&F Group offers personal liability protection that adapts to your growing, changing responsibilities, including state compacts and allowing for protection for practicing medicine across state lines. From telemedicine to license and HIPAA defense, if it's something that you need protection for, CM&F has you covered. PA students can even enjoy a completely free student policy from your first day as a student until you become a licensed PAC. In a climate where we are hyper aware of charting, wording, covering ourselves, and constantly worried about practicing defensive medicine, you can't leave your liability coverage up to chance. Enjoy the peace of mind, exceptional customer service, and find the best comprehensive coverage that fits your practice at www.cmfgroup.com/thepaisin or click the link in the show notes. Yeah. Working in healthcare has always been a humbling experience. And I do feel like it's a little bit of a roller coaster of, I've got this. I have no idea what I'm doing. I am amazing. I don't know anything. Like where you're just like, where you're just, sometimes you do know, and you are compassionate and you are in the moment and you are the provider that that patient needs. And sometimes you are not. And that is a normal part of seeing patients, because we are all human and no one is a robot here. This is not a computer diagnosing an algorithm. This is a person talking to another person.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You're making a lot of sense, Tracy. You're making a lot of sense.
I love it. Awesome. Well, speaking of humans, I would love to talk to you a little bit, both to the students listening and to the practicing clinician. Let's talk about life outside of school or life outside of work, and why this is so important when we're thinking about being that person who's also a provider. Tell us more about what you like to do outside of work and why that matters so much to you.
Thank you for asking me this. I think it is so important. It may not be how our culture is set up, certainly in healthcare or in high achieving people or in the American culture. You say, "Oh, hi, so nice to meet you. What do you do? Like, what is your job?" It is your identity, or what's your job going to be? And I think if you've had the experience of being in some other cultures or some other countries, that is offensive to start with. Who cares what you do to make your money? Like, what kind of person are you? What types of things do you value? And I think travel has opened my eyes to that a little bit more. But also, I think the pandemic changed a lot of things for people. The way that we see what is quote unquote the norm, or just the way that it is, we realized is not true. And I think for me also, seeing colleagues who lived and breathed their job and who maybe had really great relationships and strong relationships and basically chosen families in their job, die, right? That then their role becomes filled, that everyone is replaceable, despite the fact that you might have had great connections, true connections, maybe people that ended up, caring for them at the end of their life, true. But then also that the work, the actual job, the thing that they got paid for, not the relationships, someone else will come and do that. Maybe not as well, maybe not with the same flair, but that in your work, you are replaceable. Not to the people, though, not to the relationships that you have. And when you come to the end of life, are people going to say, "Look how many emails Tracy sent. She was the most prolific emailer. I've never seen someone navigate Zoom like Tracy," right? There are so many Saturdays when someone else couldn't come in that Tracy worked. And that's just not what people say, right? They don't miss that. When you're not here anymore, they're not thinking, "Gosh, those spreadsheets or that productivity or this survey." People miss you. And all of a sudden, I don't know, maybe not all of a sudden. For me, it felt quick that I said, "I'm no more." I can't have my identity only be career or a majority career, or there has to be other things as I look forward. There have to be other things that I can focus more of the time where it's going to mean something. Not that my job doesn't mean something, of course, but what did we do all of this for? You were in high school maybe, or you were in college and you decided, okay, I need to get the best grades. I need to have all these extracurriculars. I'm going to hustle, hustle, hustle. In college, you're competitive and you're worried about your GPA and the extracurriculars and patient contact hours. And are you shadowing? And then what school do you get into? And how do you navigate CASPA? And hustle, 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 PA school. There's not much time. You're doing so much work. But if you don't take that time, you do worse in school. The students who are studying nonstop, no breaks, don't do anything fun, they crash, right? And I'm doing nothing but study. I'm working so hard. I don't do anything else. And I can't get this number that's going to fulfill who I am as a person, because my whole identity has come down to getting somewhere in the 90s. And if I don't get that number, who am I? Then maybe I'm not a good person, or I don't know who I am if I'm not this top performing student. And I'm not saying to not study for your next Clin Med exam, but when there is that balance, you're thinking about the food that you're eating, how much sleep you're getting. Can you manage your stress? Can you see someone not toxic who loves you? Don't call your ex. This is not the time. Then you can do better. It's like having that, not that I would run a marathon or want to, but have the snack during the marathon, have the water during the marathon. That's what gets you across the finish line. And not to become a horrible human in the process. You've set out to say, I want to help people. I believe that I have the qualifications that I can go into healthcare and make a difference. And then why is it that we see in studies that empathy declines over medical training? That we meet healthcare providers that you think, why are you in medicine? Right? What has been wrung out of you from saying, here's something that I believe I'm good at and I can make a difference doing. And if it was just for the money, then please stop now. To a point where you're burnt out and jaded and mean. There's something in the process there, maybe, right? And in the culture of how we get there. So don't you want to come out on the other side, someone well balanced? And I think it's the same for being a PA. Like when have you arrived? Like when does the hustle stop that you can sit back and enjoy the life that you hoped you would have when you chose this career for yourself? Was it that you would pick up extra 12s and that you would do the work for, that colleague who can't be there for whatever day, that you would take on more admin, that you would accept being paid less as a woman than your male colleagues? Like, is that why you did it? Or did you hope that you would travel and get to be outside and hang out with your kids and your family, not just in the spaces in between, but that work is the thing that you do to create the life that you want? That's a lot of privilege, right? To be able to do that. But we are people who, despite where you come from as a PA, generally you're being paid a 6-figure salary. And once you get your feet underneath you, when can you start to transition away from a scarcity mindset, a competitive mindset, to enjoy the life that you were hoping to have?
Yeah. I did a podcast interview once and my guest said, I try to remember that the person I used to be, and there are a lot of people out there who are in the stage that I used to be in, was dreaming of the life that I have now. This was the thing that I was working towards this whole time. And we can be so driven that we forget to enjoy the now because we're worried about the next, right? We worry about what's next. We've achieved the thing. We got the degree. We landed the job. We got the raise. We got the leadership position. And instead of saying, wow, this is pretty great, we say, what's next?
Right. You've got to the top of Mount Everest and now you're looking for a ladder. You're looking to, and you're like, what about this view? And I'm also not saying don't be creative, don't explore, don't try to follow ambition to try and be your best. But there's a difference between doing that because it fills you up and doing that out of some weird external pressure because that's what you've gotten used to, or you've been in an unhealthy environment that it's like the frog in the pot with the heat getting turned up and you forget that there's joy. I think what's next, because I'm hungry to experience what life has to offer and what I can do in the world, is different than I need this on my resume so that I can be valuable. To who?
Yeah, it's such an important reminder that we oftentimes end up feeling like our validation is what we earn, commendations, awards, GPAs, degrees, all of these things that we kind of go through like collecting, which is fine As long as it's for the right reasons, and the right reasons for you are probably different than the right reasons for me, but what is your motivation for the things that you're pursuing? And does that life that you're building align with your values? Because if it doesn't, you're going to get there or you're going to, burn out trying. And either way, you're going to feel empty because you're not headed towards something that matters to you.
100%. I totally agree with what you're saying. I think, I'm first gen. My parents didn't go to college. They went to school. I'm making it sound like I grew up in Little House on the Prairie, but I didn't. Northeast PA isn't like that. But it wasn't always financially easy, right? And you think, no, that to say that this salary has nothing to do with why people choose this career, like that's nonsense, right? But at the end of the day, after you realize you get the salary, and it's not believe me, of course there are other things that pay you more, right? Like, this is not the most you can make. It's a lot of work, and there's a lot more careers that make a lot more money and with a lot less training and that are easier than what we do. But to totally refute that, that's crazy. We live in a capitalist society, and money makes the world go round. But if you have a rough day at work, or someone is suffering and you couldn't stop it, or worse, you were part of it, it doesn't matter what car you get into. No one cares. It doesn't. Your heated leather seats aren't going to be the comfort for your internal state. It just isn't going to matter if you don't understand yourself, like you just said. I think that was so perfectly phrased.
Well, Adrian, I think this has been such a great discussion, both about life and also about how we can really make sure we're meeting patients where they are and treating them with evidence, right? So that we are collecting that evidence as we go throughout our careers. If people want to hear more from you, they want to see you speak, they want to connect with you online, where are places that they can go to find more of you?
What a great question. I think probably the social media platform I'm using the most right now, or that's public facing, is LinkedIn. I would say there are two Adrian Bannings, and I am probably not the one that most people are looking for. The other Dr. Adrian Banning is a very famous, well-known cardiologist in England. And so my middle initial is S, that stands for Susan. And you wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I don't think you'd be confused if you found any of our profiles, but shout out to the original Adrian Banning in England. I'm sorry if you've gotten, I don't know, people have gotten us confused because we're different. So I think that I'm teaching at Delaware Valley University in Doylestown, PA. Maybe it would be a little bit weird if you stop by, but also, if you need to, that's okay. That email is easily accessible. I think also, I would love if you reached out. You can hear me as a co-host with my longtime podcast co-host, Christopher Madej, as the co-host of the American Academy of Physician Assistants podcast, brought to you by Hippo Education, the primary care reviews and perspectives. Every once in a while, Sean Lynch, Janelle Bludorn, and Chris Madej and I throw out some episodes on Airwaves and Educators, a podcast for PA educators and by PA educators. So certainly you can hear a lot of me if you want to out there. And I would love to connect with anyone.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time and for having this conversation. I think it is so needed.
Tracy, it has been an honor to be invited and to get to chat with you a little bit. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for everything that you do for our community.
I love any opportunity to check in with what you're doing in your life, how you're spending your time, what you're doing at work, who you are enjoying outside of work, how you're connecting with people inside of work, and just holding those things up and saying, is this the life that I want to be leading? Am I enjoying the journey? And am I headed for a destination full of things that I value and will truly enjoy? I hope that you enjoyed this episode of The PA is In, and that it gave you some tangible tips in terms of practicing evidence-based medicine, but also some important reminders about life and connection and the fact that we are all humans trying to take care of other humans. That's all for today. This PA is out. Congratulations, you've just joined an awesome club. By listening to a full episode of The PA is In, you are officially on the Unicorn PA team. Welcome aboard. What most team members do is they subscribe to the podcast because that allows them to automatically get the latest episode of the show. The life of your dreams exists on the other side of taking action. Keep making small shifts and keep getting better. Your life will improve, your career will soar, and you will have the confidence you need to create your own success. I will see you in the next episode. This PA is out.